Welcome to the 700 Club. The president of the University of Pennsylvania resigned after outrage over her testimony to Congress last week. Liz McGill would not say that calling for the genocide of Jewish people violated school policy.
A House panel is investigating Penn, Harvard, and other universities for their failure to address anti-Semitism. In some cases, Jewish students are suing their schools because they don't feel safe on campus. CBN's Brody Carter reports from New York.
The Jewish population in New York City is roughly 10%. At Columbia University, they're in the top 15 of private universities by Jewish population. And Jewish students that we've talked to at CBN, they tell us they simply don't feel safe here. One freshman even filing a lawsuit against the university for failing to protect her against anti-Semitism.
I choose to be hopeful that nobody would attack me physically, but do I feel emotionally safe? Do I feel welcomed? Not in the slightest.
Daniela is a 21-year-old freshman at Columbia University. Before her studies, she served in the Israeli Defense Forces as part of the Search and Rescue Brigade. After October 7th and subsequent war, anti-Israel protests flooded the university. Daniela even received death threats on the anonymous social platform SideChat. She's now suing the university for allowing anti-Semitism to thrive.
I'm asking for the administration to step in and ensure that anti-Semitism cannot run free on my college campus. And I think that's the minimum.
We're talking not just about verbal harassment, anti-Jewish epithets being hurled at Jewish students as they walk to class, for example, but we're also talking about acts of physical violence.
Mark Ressler, partner at Kasowitz, Benson & Torres, is representing Daniela. He's also suing NYU on behalf of 3 other Jewish students, alleging civil rights violations for its anti-Semitic educational environment. In an email, Columbia acknowledged the lawsuit and the Department of Education's investigation of 7 colleges of reported incidents of anti-Semitism.
Posters of Israeli hostages have been spread throughout New York City streets. Many have been defaced, even torn down. Now Jewish community leaders are calling it for what it is.
This is terrorism. This is terrorism.
Rabbi Dov Yanakorn leads a Jewish community of more than 1,300 students and young professionals at Chabad House Bowery near NYU. He says the spike of assaults, vandalism, and harassment against Jews have led to a 30% increase of young Jewish students leaning into their faith.
Right, this is horrific, but thank God the Jewish people react well under fire, and this has caused such an explosion of Jewish life and Jewish community and Jewish optimism and Jewish faith and Jewish practice.
Educational consultant Jennifer Brozo says the failure of certain universities to stand against anti-Semitism is having a negative impact on early school choice.
Unfortunately, it's a little bit too late. And a lot of students have these schools are off their list and they're going to other schools.
Whether these investigations and lawsuits tarnish the Ivy League reputation is yet to be seen. Now Jewish leaders encourage allies and partners with the Jewish community to stand against anti-Semitism as the fight makes its way to our nation's capital. Reporting in New York City, Brody Carter, CBN News.
Well, I think the Ivy League has taken it on the chin on this. I think their reputation is not going to be the same because it looks like they have absolutely tolerated this. And when you look at it and say, how in the world could you do this? You know, is the memory of the Holocaust not a current memory with you? Do you not understand what the river to the sea really means? And are you giving a free pass to people that want to call for the extermination of the Jews in the Holy Land, in Israel, and siding with people that say the Jews have no claim to their homeland? It's absolutely incredible that you would allow that on your campus and have there be no pushback. And then on top of it, to defend the students who are participating, particularly if those students are from other countries, and saying, well, if we do something, if we act against them, then they could be deported. Well, it's time for everyone to recognize what that really means. We need to follow the money. You know, who is sponsoring studies for Islamic studies on the campuses of these Ivy League institutions? Who has donated tens of millions of dollars to do that? And then where are these students and what is the tuition money going into that is absolutely influencing these decisions? So let's take a look at that and call it for what it is and follow the money. We finally have some good news out of this war, and it's really hard to say it's good news, but it is good news. It's the beginning of the end for Hamas, and that's the word from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. There were reports of some Hamas fighters actually surrendering to Israeli troops in Gaza, and he's calling on more terrorists to lay down their arms and end the fighting. Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem.
Dozens more Hamas terrorists have surrendered. The videos show them stripped down to make sure they're not carrying any explosives or suicide belts. The IDF says these surrenders show Hamas is crumbling, but cautioned it's still far from the end.
There are a great many terrorists who have surrendered there, and this is a significant thing because these are signs that terrorists who are in difficult strongholds have decided to surrender. This is a very important thing.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called out for more Hamas members to surrender.
It will take more time. The war is in full swing, but this is the beginning of the end for Hamas. I say to the Hamas terrorists, it is over. Don't die for Sinwar. Surrender now.
The UN General Assembly is scheduled to vote on a non-binding resolution demanding a ceasefire in Gaza. Netanyahu thanked the U.S. for its veto last Friday against a binding Security Council resolution calling for a ceasefire.
Other countries should also understand that it is impossible, on the one hand, to support the elimination of Hamas, and on the other hand, to call for an end to the war that will prevent the elimination of Hamas.
New developments raise concerns of a widening war, as Hezbollah increased its rocket fire into northern Israel over the weekend, and the Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen threatened to block any ships carrying supplies to Israel. Meanwhile, in the U.S. Senate, two opposing views on the war between Senators Lindsey Graham and Bernie Sanders. Citing civilian casualties in Gaza, Sanders told CBS Face the Nation it would be irresponsible for the U.S. to give Netanyahu another $10 billion to wage Israel's war against Hamas. But at a conference in Qatar, Senator Graham said the U.S. has Israel's back.
The last time a bunch of people tried to kill all the Jews 80 years ago, there was no Israel. So the one thing I can tell you, if it's your goal to kill all the Jews, you're going to have one hell of a fight on your hands. And the United States of America is going to stand with Israel without animosity toward the Palestinians.
On the international front, thousands of Europeans in Berlin and Brussels marched against anti-Semitism.
Because there is a huge increase of anti-Semitism in Belgium since October 7. We witness more than 1,000% of increase. So we are living in a very complicated period. And also to send a message to the Jewish community of Belgium to tell them that they are not alone.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, I want to tell them they're not alone either. And I absolutely want to underline to every government in Europe and our own government here in the United States and Canada and the UN, we should not put pressure on Israel. The pressure should be put where it properly belongs, and that is, let us put pressure on Hamas. They need to unconditionally surrender. They need to give up all the hostages. They are the bad actor here. It's not Israel's fault that we're in this situation. The fault is entirely and exclusively on Hamas. So, unconditional surrender, the same thing that Roosevelt said to Nazi Germany long ago. We're not going to come to peace negotiations. We're coming to take over. And that's exactly what needs to happen with Hamas.